Payment term mapping. When enabled, this is the area where the mapping records are maintained. Having the proper payment terms set up in Business Central is important for driving downstream affairs such as reminders and finance charges. Note that these mappings can be deactivated, which would prevent integration if invalid on the Bullhorn sales invoices. Salesperson mapping. When enabled, this is the area where mapping salesperson records is maintained in Business Central. Note that these mappings can be deactivated, which will prevent integration if an invalid record on a Bullhorn sales invoice does occur. Unit of measure mapping. When enabled, this is the area where mapping units of measure records are maintained. There are usually only a handful of records to set up and maintain, one time at least. Country code mapping. When enabled, this is the area where mapping country records are maintained. Customer mapping. When enabled, this is the area where mapping customer records are maintained. This can be imported using a package file to make the initial lift rather simple. Our integration design is able to accommodate the automatic creation of salespeople in Business Central. This integration of these very important lists of values between systems has a direct impact on the quality of daily transaction syncs and for reporting on sales activity. The salesperson sync can be run on demand, however, it also runs prior to the salesperson import. The salesperson codes automatically created in Business Central are based on the first initial and the last name of the user in Bullhorn. Let's take a good close look now at how GraVoc makes it all work for integrating and mapping the customers and client corporations, sales invoices and billable charges, sales credit memos, and customer payment summary information from Bullhorn 1 to Business Central. Customer integration and sync. The client corporation records in Bullhorn 1 will be created as customer records in Business Central once they achieve an active status in the ATS. The customer IDs in Bullhorn are integers or unique numbers, and this is the primary key used to sync the two systems. This works very well for Business Central, and we are also transferring over a number of other important fields, such as the name and address, phone and fax numbers, and even the company's homepage. The customer sync also detects changes in these fields in Bullhorn 1 and updates Business Central accordingly. The customer sync can be run manually, however, it is typically set to run on a schedule a few times a day. Additionally, the customer sync runs just prior to the sales invoice import to ensure all of the customers have valid records before transactions flow into Business Central. Customer field mapping. The field mappings shown throughout this demo are naturally going to be Business Central centric, but they are intended to show and display the source information acquired from Bullhorn 1. On the left, there are a number of fast tabs, or sections of the customer record in Business Central. Our customer field mapping is pretty straightforward. However, I want to note especially the invoicing fast tab. Much like Bullhorn, Business Central is also parent-child aware for large or complex billing situations. Therefore, within Business Central, the accounting and collections teams can perform roll-up reporting and analysis natively or with Power BI, as well as cross-apply cash receipts among established parent and child customers. Customer sales invoice integration. Your customer invoices are first created, formatted, summarized, and then printed or sent to your customer directly from Bullhorn 1. Once the invoice status has been marked as finalized, it can no longer be changed in Bullhorn. The sales invoice import to Business Central is typically run on demand, depending on business or process flow requirements. However, it could also be scheduled to run in an automated fashion at predetermined intervals. In order for the data to be visible to pick up and bring over, the general ledger export status needs to be set to ready to export. Once both finalized and ready for export, the sales invoice import will bring them over to the back-end accounting system. And these are reviewable, of course, prior to posting. The sales invoice number is the same as the one assigned in Bullhorn, and the external document number is a second Bullhorn document ID. Also, at the header level of the invoice document, we clearly sync the customer number and name, document date, address, salesperson, and payment terms, so the invoice will age properly in Business Central. For the invoice lines, they are driven by mechanics inside of the ATS. The billable charges map to a small handful of non-inventory items such as temp staffing or perm placement, or GL accounts for discounts, taxes, or surcharges. We discussed the setup of these early on in the demo when we covered the GL segment values required for a complete and accurate sync with Business Central. Sales credit memos. If your customers are issued a credit memo or rebill from within Bullhorn 1, our connector will import those as a sales credit memo to Business Central. Within Bullhorn, the original invoice is used and also appended with a CR indicating the change. This becomes the document number used by Business Central as well, keeping the records straight between systems and alerting the credit and collections teams, as there is also an adjustment to the aging report. The credit memo could be manually applied to the open invoice within the customer ledger of Business Central. Sales invoice and credit memo field mappings. For the header, the field mappings shown throughout this demo are naturally going to be Business Central centric, but they are intended to also display the source information acquired from Bullhorn. On the left, there are a number of fast tabs or sections of the invoice or credit memo record in Business Central, where information is typically populated. In the General section, you will note the original document and unique number from Bullhorn is mapped to Business Central, as is the sell-to customer and address information. Payment terms drive the due date for the transaction, and if the invoice should be billed to a parent company, that is carried along as well. The total of the document from Bullhorn will exactly match that which is imported to Business Central. Sales invoice field mapping, detail lines, and taxes. There are 4 areas that drive the revenue distributions for sales invoices. The primary field for line items is the revenue category, which is the billable charges. They are imported to Business Central as non-inventory or service items, which helps drive the general ledger entries. Of important note is that the dimension values, such as branch or industry, are also imported on every line of the invoice. This is a direct result of the values assigned on the placement card in Bullhorn 1. The other 3 areas include sales taxes, discounts, and surcharges, which are imported to Business Central using general ledger accounts assigned on their respective cards in Bullhorn. The total of the lines from the Bullhorn invoice will match that which is imported to Business Central, as well as overall document totals. Right back to Bullhorn. Once the sales invoice and credit memo transactions have successfully passed the Business Central validation during their import, our connector reaches back over to Bullhorn through the API and updates the general ledger export status of the invoice to export successful. If an error were to occur, information about the problem is written to the issues and issue items log in Bullhorn 1 for further review, and the general ledger export status of the invoice will remain as ready to export. Once the problem is researched and resolved, a future sales invoice import would pull the transaction into Business Central. Customer payment summary. After the sales invoice and credit memos are imported to the accounting system and posted to the general ledger, the payments should start coming in. As your customer payments are posted to the customer ledger by the accounting department in Business Central, a payment summary entry is immediately posted back into the Bullhorn 1 ATS. Utilizing this feature is optional, but it will give your recruiters and your account owners instant visibility into customer payments, which can affect their credit availability or other decision-making needs. We'll give you and your team the custom entity specification you'll need to create in your Bullhorn environment. After that, it's just a matter of enabling the cash receipts switch in the other setup section on the Bullhorn integration setup page in Business Central. Let's take a close look now at how GraVoc makes it all work for integrating and mapping the candidates, or 1099 vendors, your payable invoices or payable charges, and candidate payment summary information from Bullhorn to Business Central. Vendor, 1099 candidate integration and sync. The candidate records in Bullhorn will be created as vendor records in Business Central once they have achieved the placed status in the ATS. The candidate IDs in Bullhorn 1 are integers, or unique numbers, and this is the primary key used to sync our two systems. This works very well for Business Central, and we are also transferring over a number of other important fields such as the name and address, the phone and fax numbers, and even the email address. The vendor sync also detects changes in these fields in Bullhorn 1 and updates Business Central accordingly. The vendor sync can be run manually. However, it is typically set to run on a schedule a few times a day. Additionally, the vendor sync runs just prior to the purchase invoice import to ensure all of the candidates have valid records before their payable charges flow into Business Central. If the ATS environment is utilizing Bullhorn Onboarding 365, the candidate's electronic funds transfer information, or their ABA and bank account number, they can be imported to the vendor bank account card in Business Central, thereby allowing electronic payments to be initiated from Business Central in the standard Nacha format, which you can now send to your bank. Payments to 1099 vendors are also initiated by check or other means. Ultimately, the annual 1099 NEC reporting and forms printing would be performed from within Business Central for the payments made during that calendar year. Vendor invoice, or 1099 candidate integration. Our connector imports payable charges from your candidates. Once timesheets are approved, the transaction status is changed to approved. The purchase invoice import to Business Central is typically run on demand, depending on business or process flow requirements, but could also be scheduled to run in an automated fashion at predetermined intervals. In order for the data to be visible to pick up and bring over, the status must also be set to ready to pay. Once both approved and ready for export, the purchase invoice import will bring them over to the back-end accounting system, and these are reviewable, of course, prior to posting. Business Central assigns the next voucher number from the number series. Also, at the header level of the invoice document, we clearly sync the vendor number and name, the document date, the address, and payment terms, so the invoice will age properly and pull into the payment runs within Business Central properly. For the invoice lines, they are driven by the general ledger segment values on the placement card in Bullhorn 1. The payable charges map to a small handful of non-inventory items such as temp staffing or perm placement, which determine the labor accounts to use in the general ledger. They would also have the branch or other dimension values used for reporting and analysis. We discussed the setup of these early on in the demo when we covered the general ledger segment values required for a complete and accurate sync with Business Central. Candidate payment summary right back to Bullhorn. After the purchase invoices are imported to the accounting system and posted to the general ledger, the payments still need to get made. As your vendor payments are posted to the vendor ledger by the accounting department in Business Central, a payment summary entry is immediately posted back into the Bullhorn 1 ATS. Utilizing this feature is optional, but it will give your candidates and recruiters instant visibility into their payments, which can affect their willingness to continue working with you or other decision-making needs. We'll give you and your team the custom entity specification that you'll need to create within your own Bullhorn environment. After that, it's just a matter of enabling the Create Payment Summary switch in the Other Setup section of the Bullhorn integration setup page in Business Central. Bullhorn integration sync status, integration status, and integration log. The very nature of the cloud-based model relies on APIs for exchanging information between systems. As jobs are initiated and begin running in Business Central, the process behind the scenes requires authentication to the Bullhorn environment with the API user and the required redirect. Then, only after the session is established can the connector begin its work of requesting data, transferring, validating, and updating records. Any of the syncs or imports can be run at any time from the menu on the Bullhorn integration page, which serves somewhat as a command and control center for your end users. The sync status area on the Bullhorn integration page displays the status of each synchronization, which includes customer, salesperson, dimension value, and vendor. The left side of the integration status area beneath that displays the status and record counts of the sales-related record integrations. The right side displays the vendor-related integration status and record counts. As the integration is running, a user can refresh the browser page, and the current record values and/or any of the status would update until the process has completed. The third area on the page is the integration log, which captures any errors and summarizes the status of the sync and the import jobs. The error log data is maintained for a period of days as determined in the Other Setups and Features area on the Bullhorn integration setup page. Often this is set to 30, 60, or 90 days. GraVoc's optional Power BI dashboards for error log reporting can be especially helpful for reviewing and summarizing recent activity or provide notification of potential issues between Bullhorn 1 and Business Central. Bullhorn logging and error handling. The GraVoc connector was designed to utilize the option of writing back to Bullhorn through the API wherever appropriate. Because seamless and timely integration is always the end goal, we decided to make sure whenever an import error does occur on the Business Central side, visibility is provided within Bullhorn to the users and administrators in the ATS. The issue and issue items entities are populated with information provided by the API about any errors, which will be helpful in resolving the problem. Job queue. Automatic sync controls. The engine behind automation between our systems can be controlled from within Business Central. As we mentioned on each of the integration points we have established to Business Central, it's up to you and the needs of your specific environment if you want to automate the record synchronization or transaction imports on a schedule or run the connector on demand. The scheduling tools are built right within Business Central and are easily tailored to your specific needs. In most cases, the customer, vendor, salesperson, and dimension syncs would be set up to run on a schedule, and the transaction imports run more on demand, but the choice is up to you.